Hello, and welcome to the Hours of Service Basics training at Searcy Trucking. Today we will review the following: the Hours of Service Basics for Canada south of the 60th parallel, Hours of Service Basics for the United States, how to successfully split your sleeper berth, how to successfully use your recap hours, and rules on personal conveyance in Canada and the U.S., and contact information if you need further assistance. This chart explains the hours of service rules you must follow when you're south of the 60th parallel in Canada. Please note that we follow the Cycle 1 schedule at Searcy Trucking. Your day always begins at midnight, which includes a minimum 10 hours off duty, a maximum of 13 hours of driving, with no driving after 14 hours on duty time in a single day. Your satellite has all of these rules built into it, making it easier for you to focus on completing your trip as safely as possible. There are some rules to the Hours of Service Basics that can get a bit confusing, and if not used properly, can result in an out-of-service violation and a citation. Please ensure you're following the 36-hour rule set for Cycle 1. You may split the required off-duty hours into two periods if neither period is less than 2 hours and the total accumulated off-duty time is at least 10 hours. All drivers must take 24 consecutive off-duty hours in the previous 14 days. Please take a moment to review the daily requirements and allowances during a Cycle 1 schedule. You're allowed 13 hours of driving time during your day, with 14 hours on duty during a 16-hour work window. This will include your 10 hours off duty. Please review this screenshot of a 24-hour work period. As previously mentioned, your day starts at midnight. In this example, this driver starts his shift at 3 a.m. and finishes their shift at 7 p.m. They have 2 rest periods of 1 hour each, making this driver compliant with the Hours of Service rules for Cycle 1 in Canada. The Hours of Service rules differ slightly in the United States. As soon as you cross the Canadian-U.S. border, you are responsible for adhering to all rules of service requirements. You are only allowed 11 hours of driving during your day. However, you must only drive for 8 hours straight before taking a minimum 30-minute break either off duty or in your sleeper berth. There is a 14-hour daily work limit, which requires you to follow the 10 consecutive hours off duty once that 14-hour window has been reached. As of June 1st, 2020, the FMCSA introduced a few new changes to the Hours of Service rules regarding short haul exception, adverse driving condition exception, 30-minute break requirements, and sleeper berth provisions. The adverse driving conditions allows you to expand your driving window in order to get to a safe haven during adverse weather. You are able to extend your driving an additional 2 hours. Please ensure you are adding a remark for this exception. You are now allowed to be either on duty, not driving, or off duty to satisfy the 30-minute break requirements in the U.S. You may also spend at least 7 hours in the sleeper berth combined with a minimum off-duty period of at least 2 hours spent inside or outside of the sleeper berth, provided these 2 periods total at least 10 hours. Prior to crossing the Canada-U.S. border, please ensure you take 10 consecutive hours off duty before crossing. Although Searcy recommends taking 10 hours off, you are now able to split your sleeper berth. The rule allows you to extend an on-duty shift by splitting the required 10 consecutive hours of off-duty time into 2 shifts. To better understand how this might work in a real-life scenario, consider a truck driver who begins their day at 6 a.m. with 1 hour of on-duty, non-driving work, signaling the start of the 14-hour working window. At 7 a.m., the driver starts driving for 5 hours until 12 p.m., using 5 hours of the 11 hours of drive time and 6 hours of the 14-hour clock. At this point, the driver takes an 8-hour break in the sleeper berth, which effectively pauses the 14-hour clock. When the driver gets back on the road at 8 p.m., they have 6 hours of drive time remaining and 8 hours on the 14-hour clock. They then drive for 6 additional hours before taking 2 hours of off-duty time. Once this 2-hour break is completed, the 14-hour window restarts from the end of the first split sleeper berth shift, which means the new 14-hour window would start again from 8 p.m. Under the FMCSA rules, the combination of the two rest periods is considered the equivalent of a 10-hour break. If you choose to split the sleeper berth required time off, you must take at least 7 or 8 hours in the sleeper berth, but those two periods cannot be less than 2 hours in length. One shift must be between 2 and 8 hours or between 3 and 7 hours in the sleeper berth, off-duty or personal conveyance. The other shift must be between 7, 8, and 10 hours and can only be taken in the sleeper berth. The two breaks can be taken in any order, and by completing both the 2 and 8 hours and the 8 and 10-hour period, the 14-hour driving window is restarted from the end of the first sleeper berth shift, but not until after the second shift is completed. Since the 14-hour driving window does not restart after the end of the second period, the split sleeper berth is not a full 10-hour reset. It simply moves the start time of the 14-hour driving window. The requirements for the Canadian sleeper berth split states a single driver may have up to 2 sleeper berth periods. Each period must be at least 2 hours long and together must total 10 hours. Total driving time, on-duty time, and elapsed time on both sides of each sleeper berth period cannot exceed 13, 14, and 16 hours respectively. Team drivers may have up to 2 sleeper berth periods. 10 hours of rest is required each day by each driver. The 10-hour rest time must also include 2 sleeper berth periods of at least 4 hours each, and together the 2 sleeper berth periods must total 8 hours. Like a single driver, total driving, on duty, and elapsed time on both sides of each sleeper berth period cannot exceed 13, 14, and 16 hours respectively. Drivers often ask what recap hours are and how to use them. A recap refers to when you have driven more than 8 days in the U.S. without a 34-hour reset, or 7 days in Canada without a 36-hour reset. Each day you get more hours added to your 70-hour clock depending on how many you were on duty and driving 8 days ago, or 7 days in Canada. You also lose the amount you drive in the current day. If you say you are running a recap this week, it means that you did not get a 34-hour reset after the previous 8 days, so you did not start the week with a fresh 70 hours. Every day, hours you drive today get used up and hours you used 8 days ago get added. Please take a few moments to review the use of U.S. recap hours. Please take a few moments to review the use of Canadian recap hours. The rules for personal conveyance differ greatly between Canadian and U.S. rules. In Canada, commercial drivers are limited to 75 kilometers per day if you are empty with no trailer. If you drive over 75 kilometers, your satellite will automatically put you into driving, and the entire time spent in personal conveyance will then change to driving time. Please ensure you do not violate this rule. Personal conveyance rules in the U.S. differ because commercial drivers are able to use the tractor for personal use even if the vehicle is loaded, just as long as you have been relieved from all responsibility of performing work by the motor carrier, meaning CRC trucking. It is extremely important you add remarks into your personal conveyance status change if you are going to use this rule. CRC would prefer that you are unloaded or bobtailing in order to use a personal conveyance option in the U.S. Please visit the FMCSA website for examples on how to use PC in the U.S. We will now provide you several examples of proper use of personal conveyance in the United States. Please take a moment to review. We will now provide you several examples of non-qualifying use of personal conveyance in the United States. Please take a moment to review. Please contact your fleet coordinator or the driver services team if you have any questions. We also have after hours and weekend support available for emergencies. Thank you for taking the time to ensure you are up to date on all of the FMCSA Canadian and U.S. hours of service basics. Welcome to Searcy Trucking.